inductive reasoning works. I mean, deduction is going from what you already know to something that follows from it. Induction is giving us something new. Deducere means leading from. Inducere means leading into, right? And so, how do we find out something new? Well, he's an empiricist, and so was Aristotle. Famously, Aristotle looks at a swan. Actually, I don't think he looked at swans, but if you ever look at Aristotle's Lagoon, that's not quite an hour program that gives you a beautiful idea of what Aristotle and his interests were. Aristotle's Lagoon, BBC production, very well done, lots of fascinating things. Looking in the lagoon where Aristotle did a lot of his botany work, and finding specimens, cutting them up, describing all the different parts. But Mill realizes that with the advance that science is going through in his day, steam engines, all kinds of things going on. Science needs rules to improve our inductive reasoning, and you end up with him coming up with, let's go Mill's methods here. Oh, shoot, let's just go. Sure, there's a whole bunch in the so when you're doing scientific experiments, you want to look for things that are present when a specific effect occurs, and that's called the method of agreement. If it always seems to rain when the humidity is high, and humidity is low and it doesn't rain, whoa, hey, seems to be a cause and effect relationship between high humidity and rain. Method of agreement, right? Method of difference would be, well, it's not raining and it's not humid. Is that the same thing, looking at it from a different perspective? But basically what you're looking for is, hey, this isn't present, and so this doesn't happen. So and then of course you take the two of those together, and you get the joint method of agreement and difference, and you end up then with using both of those methods together, and that gives you even more secure cause and effect relationships. And then method of residues, look for, here's all of the different things that could be happening that could cause something. Take some of them away, and what do you find out? The reason that a cause or an effect still happens must then be a result of what's left. And the method of, this is my favorite because I like the big word concomitant. The method of concomitant variation. So, say the humidity is going up and it rains, and it goes down and it stops raining, So in other words, as things statistically go up and down, for example, Trump gets elected and my stock market just went up. The biggest leap in years or something, Oh, how did that happen? Concomitant variation. there's some examples of things that he actually discovered. One of the problems that London, actually not just London, but Leeds, other towns, had high cases of children getting rickets. And he, in using his methods, figured out that it was the lack of sunshine. That because of the coal as the main fuel in the communities, the skies were, very full of coal soot, and as a result, the sun wasn't getting through. And plus, a lot of the kids were working in the mine all day, and they never saw the sunlight, and as a result, they weren't getting their vitamin D from the sun. I don't know if they figured out it was vitamin D, but they did figure out that it was lack of sunlight. So you need a certain amount of sunlight in order for you to not get rickets. As another interesting experiment, people thought that if you have a damp shirt and a food source nearby, poof, you will have instant mice. And he said, well, you need controls, replicability and controls on your experiments. Replicability, if I do something and say, aha, this works, and then you try to do it in your lab and it doesn't work for you. It's not replicating. There's something wrong with it, right? So I'm wrong, thinking that my experiment was a good experiment. Somebody else ought to be able to do the same thing. So replicability is important, but control also. So let's take a damp shirt and a food source, put it inside a box that mice can't get into, and check it every couple of days to see if there are mice in the box. And guess what? There are no mice in the box. So it's not just instantaneous life, It's instead, you need parent mice to get to that food source and the damp shirt. So replicability and controls. He was famous, by the way, for lots of things. On Liberty was a book that he published in 1859, which is a year before our Civil War. Right? So, and that's the official definition of a liberal, but that's in the conservative sense. And so when we talk today about liberals, they're way different than the kind of liberal he was talking about. His is a conservative one. In fact, I would say it's closer to a libertarian. Libertarian. Although he was involved in Parliament, he was elected to a 2-year term, and he did try to help increase laws that helped poor people. But keep in mind, a contemporary of his was Charles Dickens. Remember the literature that Charles Dickens writes. The one I imagine everybody's familiar with is A Christmas Carol. Yes? Ebenezer. We all know that name. He's a Scrooge, a miser, just focused on his own wealth, counting the money. Well, the ghosts come and scare the crap out of him, and he decides to go out and buy the turkey or goose for, the Cratchit family. And, he even wants to go and have dinner with them. He's still into happiness, but now he's looking at happiness now instead of in the future because of lots of money. So the moral of the story is, spread the wealth. Don't just keep it to yourself. One of Charles Dickens' other books is Hard Times, which is a novel about Mr. Gladgrind. Gladgrind. Right away with a name like Gladgrind, he's just the same kind of Scrooge-like, person. And of course, he comes to miserable things as well, because of his way of running his company and stuff. Oliver Oliver Twist, familiar with that? So how many of Charles Dickens' books can you go through and discover, hey, the moral is the same thing? And every single one of them, he's basically trying to take the elite who are reading his books and make them aware of just how miserable life is for the poor classes and how they ought to change the laws to help them and so on. And John Stuart Mill is doing the same thing. His wife, Harriet Taylor, inspired him, he says, to write the subjection of women and on liberty and bunches of other stuff that basically are all aimed at using utilitarian ethics in order to improve the lot of the poor people, especially. So, utilitarianism is an ethical theory. I think I mentioned when Sam Harris was giving his lecture that he's a utilitarian. He's convinced that happiness is the main thing that drives all decisions. And so you could use science to make your decisions, improve them by scientifically determining which decisions you make will give people more happiness. Literally measure it. That was actually a theory originated by Jeremy Bentham. Did I mention him? For me, the most significant thing about Jeremy Bentham is that he still attends every board meeting at the college, the University College of London. Because in his will, he insisted that he continue to attend every meeting. And so what they do is they bring his mummified dead body. Wow. Isn't this hilarious? The head is a wax head, but the body is his mummified so that it can sit basically in the lobby of the library at the university. In fact, one year I had a student who visited there and took a selfie of him standing next to this and sent it to me on Facebook. So that's pretty cool. It used to be that his head was sitting here on the floor, his real head. But they wheel him. They've updated his case a little bit. There's his head. So that's fun. But he's the one that came up with the definition of utility. That's the greatest good for the greatest number. But if you look at how they work with that, it depends on who you are. So if you're a member of the elite, you deserve more than the people that are not in the elite. So there are qualifications on the greatest good for the greatest number. But back to Charles Sanders Peirce. Notice that's a quite interesting quote Bertrand Russell wrote. He was one of the most original minds of the latter 19th century and the greatest American thinker ever. Wow, that's high praise. But it's also the case that most people aren't familiar with him. You can visit his home, Arisby. It's in the Delaware Water Gap. just 3 miles south of the Walmart, if you're interested. That's not his home. I'm sorry. Arisby. Let's find Arisby. I'm pretty sure they have the picture here somewhere. That's him and his wife. Here it is. This is Arisby. You can visit there. Boring, actually. I mean, if you're bored on the road, that's something to do before you go to the Walmart for snacks. But